Hi, everyone, and welcome to another weekly wisdom. These are always exciting and they're always a lot of fun. Today's is a little more serious because there's been a lot happening in the world, and specifically here in the United States and in New York. So I wanted to dedicate one of our weekly wisdoms to how talking about what's happening in the world outside of work can really help us all build inclusion. And there are many instances where I'll talk to leaders who don't quite know how to talk about those things or don't quite know that it's that important to acknowledge these instances. So, specifically today, I'm excited to have our topic be about how acknowledging what's going on in the world can build inclusion. And for those of you who are unaware of why this is a topic today, there have been a lot of instances, whether it's some of the conversations around Roe v. Wade in the news a couple of weeks ago, to the awful, horrendous, racially motivated shooting that took place in Buffalo, New York, to some of the experiences of anti-Asian hate as well that's been happening over the last few months. There are many things that are on your employees' minds. To the war in Ukraine, there's so much that is impacting our employees. And what's important to recognize is that acknowledging what's going on in the world and what might be on our fellow peers and employees' minds can go a long way to helping to build a more inclusive workplace. So before we jump right in, let me just remind you that Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Eastern, we hop on and we talk about some diversity, equity, and inclusion tips and tricks. Today, we are just going to talk about why it's so important to acknowledge these instances when they happen. So let's jump right in with the first point, which is that whenever you have conversations about what's happening outside of work, it humanizes you as a leader. And this is important because sometimes there is a sense of work being separate from everything else. And humanizing yourself as a leader and making sure that you're contextualizing yourself as part of this landscape, this experience of life that we're all going through, can go a long way to creating a sense of inclusion and to ensuring that your people feel more comfortable being around you and being themselves around you. Secondly, we know that when you have these conversations, you are demonstrating courage and vulnerability. These are two skills that are directly correlated with building psychological safety within a workplace. By having these difficult conversations, you are leaning into moments of courage. This is difficult. It's difficult to talk about these feelings, to ask someone how they're feeling, or just to let them know that you are there for them. And it's deeply important that we lean into these opportunities to build or demonstrate courage and to demonstrate vulnerability. And of course, there are different nuances related to how you would approach this based on what we're talking about here. But wanted to make sure that you knew that psychological safety is something that can lead to a greater sense of inclusion. And if demonstrating courage and vulnerability does that for us, then we should consider leaning into that. Okay, then lastly, another reason why we want to consider creating a space where we talk about and acknowledge what's happening in the world is because it becomes a gateway to mental health support and opportunities for company-sponsored wellness. What we know is that a lot of these instances create a lot of instability, can be really stressful and impact the amount of stress that your employees are feeling. So you'll want to make sure that in addition to acknowledging these moments, that you're also sharing the resources that exist within your company to support mental health and well-being. That is huge when it comes to building an inclusive workplace. These go hand in hand. If people have concerns and or if they're struggling with their mental health, it's difficult for them to feel that they belong and that they can be 100% committed and excited to do the work within your workplace. Here are, again, the 3 reasons why acknowledging this is so important, or how acknowledging what's going on in the world can build inclusion. The first, just as a recap, is because it humanizes you as a leader, which is an important thing to keep in mind as you're really trying to show that you care about what people are thinking, even outside of work. You care about them as people. It demonstrates courage and vulnerability, which is a path toward psychological safety, which is instrumental in building an inclusive workplace environment. And lastly, it can be a way to offer and get people support in the mental health space and in the wellness space. You are able to provide these resources, which we know are often underutilized, and that all by itself can help build that sense of inclusion. We have been getting a lot of questions around how to have these conversations. We have a lot of resources on our website. You're welcome to check us out at cnetwork.com if you're curious about what those resources are. We also have some resources specifically about talking about race, which feels incredibly relevant given the just extremist, awful white supremacist experience that happened in Buffalo over the weekend. Excuse me. And I think it's important for us to continue to have those conversations as we seek to build a more inclusive and anti-racist workplace environment. All right, everyone. That was our weekly wisdom. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week, and we'll talk then. Bye.